Hi, I'm Tiffany and this is Kristen Helm Farms. I'm growing flowers in the southeastern Arizona desert. I'm growing flowers slowly, imperfectly, and honestly. Join me on my journey. Hello flower friends, let's talk a little bit about what my previous season has taught me about growing out here in the southeastern Arizona desert. I've learned a lot this year. Some things I was able to learn quickly and manage, and other things I just had to kind of say, oh well, maybe next year. But these are some of the things that I wrote down that I definitely want to share in case they are helpful for anybody else who is wanting to grow flowers in a tough, arid condition similar to what I deal with here in southeastern Arizona. And so one of my first things I want to talk about, timing is key, especially here in the desert. We have very short growing seasons, which is something I was not used to at all coming from the Midwest. So in the Midwest, we have straight 4 seasons: spring, summer, fall, winter. Out here, it's like they have a very short winter period. They have a very windy period, and then they have the hot baking summer. Anything that is in between those tends to be treated kind of like a micro season. And so when I say that, I mean we have weeks to get things in the ground and ready to go and ready to harvest. So especially, I'm going to switch to vegetables for a second here, but vegetables primarily, we use a lot of quick growing varieties, such as things that have maybe a 60 to 90 day turnaround for those very short periods that we have to grow here. Anything beyond that would probably not make it. And so let's switch into flowers and talking about them for a second. So flowers, especially what we consider cool flowers, which are flowers that thrive in that kind of late winter, early spring season due to the cool temps that they enjoy, and they don't thrive well in those hot temps of like the summer. So that's where it gets tricky out here, is because we have, again, those little micro seasons to where we might be able to get things planted, they might thrive, or we might get like the weirdest heat streak in between that just kills everything off. So it's really frustrating out here, and it was a hard lesson to learn that even though I did attempt to grow a lot of cool flower seedlings outside in rows and beds, I really got nothing out of those. The only ones that were successful for me were my Monarda lambada. I did have those in a very controlled bed though, and so I was able to baby those a lot easier and keep my eye on them. But other things, as I mentioned in other videos, like my Sweet William, I did alyssum, I did baby's breath, I did a bunch of other things. They've really struggled or just didn't get off the ground at all. And so that is why I just kind of had to throw my hands up and say maybe cool flowers just aren't it out here, just due to those weird short seasons and transitions. And so I try my best to focus on getting earlier pushings out for things like sunflowers and other warm types of varieties to see if I can cover them with frost cover, if hopefully they'll make it through. And so that's what I mean, is that timing is absolutely key out here. If you miss those windows, even by say a week or two, then you're just out of luck. Not everything grows here, and I guess that could kind of go hand in hand with my previous point, but I want to talk a little bit more so about the fact that I was devastated when I came out here, and I have a love and affinity for delphinium. It is one of my absolute favorite flowers to grow. I had them growing in my gardens back in Ohio. I love peonies. They are so beautiful. Again, I had those growing in my garden back in Ohio, and I came out here to find that a lot of those things struggle where I'm at in my zone. And I say this as a caveat because you may, again, where I'm located, you can go 20 minutes up the road and it'll be a completely different growing zone, depending where you're located at. So some folks actually may be able to grow some of these varieties, but for me, unfortunately, I had to learn the hard way that those do not grow here. And so that's what I mean, is that all flowers won't grow here. Some are going to grow perfectly up in zones that are located maybe in the Midwest, the Northeast, what have you. But unfortunately down here, there's certain things that we can't grow, but similar to them too. You know, you're not going to go to Ohio and see a saguaro cactus growing in someone's backyard or a giant date tree. It's just not realistic, right? So I guess I had to kind of shift my expectations on which cut flowers that I truly could grow here. Next point I want to make is that you can't always believe the seed packets. And so this is a hard one, I think, for a lot of folks who come out here. And I don't have an example really, but I know you all will know what I'm talking about. You go to the big box store, you can flip over the back of the seed packet, and it's going to have a little diagram of the United States on it. And it's going to have everything like partitioned out in nice colored sections to tell you which growing zones, what time to plant, what months to plant, you know, that kind of thing like that. We can't necessarily go by that out here, even though we're in a huge, colorful swath like the rest of the US, unfortunately. You know, our zone, even though it might be the same number as, say, Florida zone or Georgia, we're completely a different environment. They are tropical, and we are obviously desert out here. And so they have different percentages of rainfall than what we get out here, and obviously different humidity and things like that you have to consider. So unfortunately, even though that packet might have Arizona and it might have that section that it says, you know, plant from May to whatever, but unfortunately, not really the case. The best thing to do is to definitely do your research on plants and seeds and things and flowers you want to grow. For my case, I do definitely use books as needed to help with determining when and if I can grow those. Also, if you can find a reliable source online, definitely use that. Use your local growers. You know, there's lots of great YouTube information out there as well currently. There's a lot of good growers here in Arizona who are sharing things as they go along. And so use those resources because they had to learn the hard way. I'm learning the hard way. And so I'm sharing this feedback in order to help. But that was one of the things that was kind of tough to learn. Another tough thing out here is that water is an absolute necessity. Yes, even if your plants say that they are drought tolerant. Water to me is the biggest thing out here, and it's the biggest struggle I felt like I had last season, and for a couple different lessons that I'm actually going to talk about here. But the first one I want to talk about is that it is an absolute necessity. You cannot just buy plants that have tags that say they are drought tolerant or grow flowers or whatever that say they are highly drought tolerant and then expect them to just thrive in your the side of your yard for the entirety of the season with minimal water. Not going to work. Those guys will crash and burn quickly. And so I'm here to say that I did have to frequently water my flowers to get anything out of them. If I didn't, they really struggled. They were really, you know, just droopy and not happy. And so I did have to make it so that I was on a regular rotation of watering. And even in the summer, in those hottest parts, I was watering daily. Every evening and sometimes even in my morning, I had to go out and water my plants just to ensure that they were thriving. And a lot of you say, well, why are you watering so much? We get no rain here. And that's the other downfall, is that where I am located, our anticipated rainfall can vary from 8 inches to possibly 12 inches for the entirety of the year. Not all of that comes at the same time. Part of that is broken up in the winter rain seasons and then also in these summer monsoon seasons. And we never know what we're going to get. And I can absolutely attest to you from the last 2 seasons I've had here, we met none of those goals they had pretty much set for our monsoon rains and our winter rains. It was rare that we actually ever meet the goal of necessary rainfall. Might actually be a different story for Phoenix this year, but I'm not located there. We definitely had some rain, but where I am at specifically, this is where it gets interesting, folks. So our county did get some decent monsoon, I would say, this summer, but it hit in different areas. It did not hit the entire swath of the county. It's very spotty, and my area suffered a lot this season. We got barely anything. I would watch the storm clouds go right overhead, and so that's what I'm meaning, is that you really have to depend on a water source out here. You can't just say Mother Nature will take care of it for me. So the next point to talk hand in hand with water is that not all water sources are created equal. And again, this was another tough lesson that I had to learn. You can get water different ways out here where I am located. If you are lucky enough to be able to drill a well, you have that private well to yourself. You have all that abundance of water as long as it lasts. But you can use that water. There's really little to no treatment, especially if you're using it for irrigation purposes and things of that sort. And so it's all yours. And there's usually no issue, hardly, with that type of water. You can have water hauled in, which is essentially a private company which trucks in large tankers of water to refill your reservoirs or your cisterns. And they just come back and refill that. They are typically tapping into a private well system. or a shared well type of system in order to bring that water to you. And the last one is that a lot of folks depend on private water companies, and that is the boat that I fall into, which is that I am paying a private water company that has hooked up water to our property. And of course they have a meter, they come out, read it, and then we get billed for the amount of water usage. The downside of using these private companies is that of course they are probably heavily regulated, and they have to add things like chlorine into the water to ensure that folks are not getting diseases or sick or dying of dysentery, right? But while that's great for humans, it's not great for plants. The heavy chlorination levels, what it does is it creates a very heavy sediment into the ground, and there's really no good way to flush that out other than just having excellent rainwater to come and try to clean the beds out. But that sediment, what it does is it builds up in the bed, almost like a calcium sort of in a way, and then it kind of starts choking out those roots and just kind of ruining the ground essentially. So that's what I mean, like not all water is created equal, and that was one of my hard lessons I had to learn this year, is that even though I could water whenever I wanted to with the turn of my faucet out here, it doesn't necessarily mean that I have the greatest water going into my soil and my plants. Finally, the last point I wanted to talk about as far as a lesson learned is that shade is absolutely crucial out here. So definitely something I learned. I want to say that I knew this ahead of time. So one of the things we did when Paul and I came out to Arizona originally is that we paid a visit to one of the botanical gardens in Phoenix to kind of see how they were maintaining all of those plants there in the extreme heat. And one of the things we did notice right away is that they had large shade cloth structures. And in my research of other successful flower farmers who previously lived in this area was that I noticed they too were also using shade cloth structures to cover their plants. A lot of these were hoop-like structures that a lot of the flower farmers were using, and these also acted as a secondary pest prevention technique to kind of keep grasshoppers and things off of plants. But the other thing that was nice is it shaded it from those harsh afternoon sun. And so that is one of the things that I definitely had to learn the hard way this season, is that I went and planted a whole bunch of transplants, and then I would come out like a day or two later and they would all just be gone or burnt to a crisp. And so the hardest thing I did have to learn is that the transplants especially, they need that shade. That shade is so crucial. Once the plants are established, typically they can have that shade cloth removed and they can continue to thrive and grow in the desert. But unfortunately, those transplants, so crucial, and they absolutely have to have that shade, whether you do a large overhanging shade structure or perhaps you do the hoops where it kind of covers, like how I did in my past growing season. It's just something that is an absolute necessity out here. Our UV rays are tough. They are harsh, even in the wintertime. Yes, I don't cover in the wintertime because of the position of the sun. However, in the summer, it is so hard to make certain that your plants are going to thrive because that sun is straight overhead and it's just beating down on them constantly, and there's very little room for shade in those scenarios. So, you know, I lost hundreds of plants just with trial and error this year. That's just some lessons that I wanted to share with you about my previous growing season and some things I learned about growing in this harsh desert environment. Not impossible, but guys, it's not easy either. It definitely takes some skill, it takes some thought, and for the biggest part, it takes a lot of dedication. You know, Paul and I didn't take any vacations at all last season. We were here solely for the duration of summer, and so we were here to water daily. If you're not here to water daily, you have to have a timing system, a neighbor, or something in order to help keep those plants thriving. It's unfortunately not something you can take off for a couple weeks and then hope that it will be fine when you come back. It's just the harsh reality of being a grower and farmer out here is that, you know, sometimes our lives are controlled by our plant schedules and everything else. Those are some of my lessons I wanted to share. I have a book more, to be honest, guys, but that's all I'm going to get through today. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.